Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. It's your brother Asari, back with yet another one. I mean, peace to the true and living. Who is the true and living? If you've been checking out these videos, kind of following some of this material, I appreciate you. But you want to know who the true and living is? You are the true and living. Nice to meet you. Peace to the gods, the elder gods, the young gods, and all of those in between. All right, so okay, so you might probably see the title of the video. Today we're gonna do a interesting I would say this would be more than anything a thought experiment. I'm gonna go ahead and give you the disclaimer on what I'm talking about. This is gonna be a thought experiment. I'm not with this. I'm not trying to say this is the gospel truth or anything like that. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna examine some things, and we're gonna take it. Okay, so basically, typically the concepts of reincarnation, karma, all that stuff like that is examined through a spiritual lens. No doubt it is a part of various different spiritual philosophies or whatever, but today we're going to do a little bit of a thought experiment, um, kind of touching on some of Robert Becker's work and kind of filtering it through that Tesla like we've been doing in a lot of this series or whatever. Um, just a little thought experiment on on what would commonly be called the human soul, karma, reincarnation. But it's not going to be from a spiritual perspective. It's going to be from a purely electrical perspective. So we're dealing with these things as electrical phenomenon. And like I said, it's a thought experiment because I'm not saying the soul is not a spiritual thing or whatever case may be, and it's documented in spiritual um, literature and everything like that. But that's not what we're doing today. We're gonna take a different approach because as we've been doing on a lot of these other videos, we've been taking these different approaches, filtering multiple things through various different framework, and we come up with all kind of little nuances that we would not otherwise get. Now I'm gonna be piggybacking off of the previous video that we did, the Ether Volume 9. All right. Um, Human Photosynthesis Volume 2, where we talked about cellular regeneration and all that. Okay, so with this, the title of the video may be a little bit different, but we're gonna start this off. This may get a little wordy and a little nerdy. I'm gonna warn you. This is others to self. We kind of persevere in this, but I guarantee you will enjoy this, or some of the nuances that we do come out of that do come out of this conversation will be quite intriguing. Um, okay, does cellular regeneration mirror reincarnation? Right? Does cellular regeneration mirror reincarnation? Now, I woke up out my sleep because this correlation came to me from the last video that we did in regards to Robert Becker's work on cellular regeneration. Okay, woke up out my sleep, kind of wrote some of this down, went back to sleep, and kind of fleshed out a lot more the next day. But okay, so when we use energetic language, remember how we were talking about the book, excuse me, the paper, um, Silent Weapons for Secret Quiet Wars and all that stuff like that. And when you read that, they're talking about banking and various things as far as human life is concerned. They're talking about it in the context of energetic language because they say that's most universally compatible. So that's another reason why, let's say in self to others, we use a lot of energetic language. Okay, so when we use energetic language to describe things, sometimes it brings out interesting nuances, like what we just said. I'm not preaching this as the gospel truth. What we're about to talk about, this thought experiment here. However, in looking into this material, I could not ignore this correlation. The correlation that we're about to talk about, the correlation of stem cells as it pertains to Robert Becker's work, and we get into that kind of like in detail. Got into that in a little bit more detail in the previous video. Kind of gonna go in a little bit different way on this video, but stem cells from Robert Becker's work, how he talks about it, and the human soul. All right, so that's gonna be a large part of the correlation where a lot of this other stuff comes out of. Okay, so in a previous video, we delved into the human cellular regeneration and the research of Robert O. Becker, right? His research, a lot of his bulk of his research done like the 60s and everything like that. I think he passed in 2008. In some of his research, he dealt with regenerating human limbs, and with that, the process of cellular de-differentiation, Now we're going to get into that cellular de-differentiation, right? Let's see here. Okay. Robert O. Becker proposed that de-differentiation, the reversion of specialized cells to a more primitive state, could be induced by bioelectric signals. So he's saying that the body is electrical. So he's saying electrical signals out of the body um, um, triggered this process in the cell to drive tissue regeneration. He conversely suggested that this process could be harnessed for medical applications, including nerve and limb regrowth. Went over a lot of this in the previous video, rehashing just a little bit of it, not being trying to be too redundant. Anybody who didn't catch the last video or whatever, they'll kind of have enough to kind of make sense of this until they go back and check that out. Okay, so bioelectric connection, the body's electric field. Becker's research centered on bioelectricity. I think we went into this book, Healing is Voltage, a little bit by Dr. Jerry Tennant. He's another proponent of the electrical body. Becker's research centered on bioelectricity. He observed specific electrical signals at injury sites and proposed that these signals originating in the nervous system were the key to triggering regeneration or healing, right? Cellular transformation. According to Becker, the electrical signals could transform mature differentiated cells, specialized cells like a liver cell or a kidney cell in the area of an injury back to a stem cell, right? Back to a stem cell, right? Stem cell is like a cell in its primitive state or whatever, where it can turn into any type of cell or whatever case may be as needed. Okay, let's see. He talks about nucleated red blood cells. Okay, the method of electrically stimulated regeneration. A method of regeneration. Becker's most notable experimental work involved attempting to electrically stimulate regeneration by introducing free silver ions, applying electrical current. He claimed to induce tissue regeneration in wounds by stimulating local cells to de-differentiate. So he's basically talking about how this can be induced in humans because it happens naturally in reptiles, amphibians, salamanders, things of that nature that can have limbs severed and then grow them right back or whatever. But for us, it's more dormant, and and he found that it had to be stimulated via electrical fields. But okay, so in just that conversation right there, as far as when we just talked about de-differentiation, okay, we're gonna continue to make the correlation. The stem cell, okay, de-differentiated into something that can turn into anything, but then an electrical signal can make it specialized into a kidney cell or a liver cell. So we're going to compare this in this thought experiment, because we've been saying for numerous videos, nature is self-similar across scale. Now you can take that one to the bank in this particular video, because you'll kind of, we're going to make that correlation. So the stem cell is going to be compared to the human soul, and the de-differentiation process is going to be compared to dying, and then the respecialization into a specialized cell such as a kidney cell or liver cell is going to be akin to the person adopting a new identity and a new life and everything like that. So we're going to go into that, and like I said, this is a thought experiment. You see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to say that this is, the gospel truth or nothing like that, but it's an interesting correlation, because some of this stuff, we're about to get into some of Tesla's stuff, and we're about to apply some of Tesla's electrical stuff into the human body as it pertains to proteins and things of that nature. We did a little bit of it on the previous video. We're going to continue down that rabbit hole. So okay, okay, Becker's dealing with de-differentiation. Okay, let's see here. Okay, in Tesla's lingo, ether in polarization is electricity or discharge. Magnetism would be ether in motion, and dielectric would be ether under stress or strain, aka the electrostatic state. Now, Tesla talks about captured ether. You see what I'm saying? When we talk about dielectric, right? That's electrostatic and all that stuff like that. But to to super oversimplify that, think of a battery. And when we're talking about cells in this context, like what we're about to be talking about, we're not necessarily talking about a battery with a positive and a negative terminal. We're talking about the blueprint of the cell, the program of the cell that makes it from a stem cell to come and become a liver cell. The liver cell program, or whatever case may be, um, is what we actually talking about. Um, Hold on one sec. When we talk about it being a battery, we're talking about the charge that the battery is holding is the framework, is the blueprint, is this liver cell or kidney cell or arm cell or brain cell program or framework that it maintains or whatever. So that would be the charge. So Nikola Tesla is calling this stuff etheric vortexes and everything like that. But he's referring to cells and proteins within the body as etheric vortexes or whatever in their dielectric state. Whenever you hear dielectric in this conversation, it's talking about a battery. It's talking about a state in which it's like a battery. It maintains a particular um, framework. Let me see. Okay, when contrasting that with ether physics, and for the sake of simplification, they appear more as batteries, but not like Duracell batteries, like we say, but just batteries holding a charge. A part of that charge being their level of specialization as a cell. So if proteins and cells are the ether in its neutral electrostatic capacitive state, aka solid matter, aka a battery, and the specialization of a cell is a particular charge that it holds, i.e., whether it is a liver cell or a kidney cell. So basically, the idea that cells under certain conditions can change from their current assignment, revert to a stem cell like state, and change into a different type of cell than they started. We always say that nature is self-similar across scale. Stretching this a little bit further, not from any type of spiritual perspective, like I was saying earlier, but from an electric, energetic charge perspective, all matter, like Tesla would say, matter is captured ether. All matter must adhere to some type of energetic blueprint. We've already talked about that. We talked about that when we were talking about Eileen Day McCusick's work in the human biofield and everything like that. Simply by virtue of the fact that it has a specific form. Copper has properties, iron has properties, aluminum has properties, or whatever case may be. So even that stuff, even though we may not have the instruments to get a bead on the blueprint of those things or whatever, but they must have a blueprint because they have particular properties or whatever case may be. So moving right along. Um, let's see here. All right, so we filtered this through the AI. So that was just kind of like my crude introduction. Like I told you, I woke up out my sleep and wrote some of that up because it just came to me like that, corresponding the soul with stem cells. So we're gonna get a little bit deeper into it. Okay, so da, 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 da. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, okay, the body electric, a semiconducting system. Robert Becker's central thesis exploring his work, The Body Electric, is that biological systems are fundamentally controlled by direct current electrical fields. So we've been talking about electrical fields a lot, which serve as a foundational layer of information transfer beyond standard biochemistry, right? Beyond standard biochemistry. So it's a bioelectrical thing going on. Becker argued that the body's tissues and cells operate as semiconductors, a concept he substantiated with detailed studies on the piezoelectric properties of living bone and such. Okay, so we talked about all that on a previous video. So the current of injury and dedifferentiation. The cornerstone of Becker's research was his discovery of the current of injury, a measurable electrical signal that appears at the site of wound or lesion. His experiment revealed that a specific negative electrical current at the location serves as a powerful signal to trigger cellular dedifferentiation, that process that we talked about earlier, where the a specialized cell becomes a stem cell and then becomes a different type of specialized cell. Dedifferentiation is the remarkable process in which specialized or differentiated cells revert to a primitive unspecialized state. This reversion unblocks the cell's latent genetic potential, allowing it to proliferate and subsequently redifferentiate into blastema, the precursor mass of cells necessary for tissue and organ regeneration. I know it's a little bit redundant from the last video if you caught the last video, but it's gonna get good in the end because we building you up for the correlation. Okay, so let's see here. Uh, Let me see here. Becker's ideas and experimental approach was largely, let's see here, not adopted by the scientific community. Da, 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 da. Okay. Okay, Tesla's ether, an eternal recipient and transfer. Nikola Tesla, like many of his contemporaries, believed in the existence of a pervasive fluid-like medium he called the ether. We talked about that, got a whole series on that filled all space and connected all gross matter. Tesla saw the ether not as a rigid passive substance, but as an eternal recipient and transmitter of infinite energy that is stored throughout the universe. In his view, the ether was a fundamental medium for transmission of all energy and forces, including light, heat, gravity, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so very similar to kind of how they got the Higgs boson. I mean, we talked about this on a previous video, just kind of like skimming over that so we can get closer to the punchline. Okay, ether, strain, and motion, the nature of electricity. In Tesla's framework, electricity was not a flow of discrete electrons, but a state or condition of the ether itself, a state or condition of the ether itself. He proposed that the effects of static electricity were manifestations of the ether under strain, right? Similar to what we said a few minutes ago. While the effects of dynamic electricity and electromagnetism were those of the ether in motion, right? He posited that there was only one type of electricity and that its positive or negative character was determined by its condition, suggesting a fundamental unity to electromagnetic phenomena. This led him to the idea that electricity could be called ether associated with matter or bound ether. So we're going to get into that. And that this bound ether was under a state of motion or strain around molecules. You see what I'm saying? He starts to get into that. So our solid world, or whatever case may be, could be construed like what he's calling bound ether or what have you. So let's see here. Let's keep moving along. Bioelectrics and quantum biology, proteins as dielectric semiconductors. We went into a little bit of this in the previous video, but we just seasoning the pot for the correlation a little bit later. So we're gonna keep on, just humor me in this. The modern convergence of biology and electronics. The field of bioelectrics has emerged as as a domain of intense research dedicated to the convergence of biology and electronics. That's what we've been talking about in this whole series. The the discipline is motivated by the desire to physically interface man-made semiconductor devices with biological systems to probe, sense, and modulate their electrical activity or whatever. As we're going to see in a minute, the biological systems are semiconductors themselves, right? This confirms that the fundamental premise of biological components possessing electrical properties is not a fringe idea. The foundational premise of biological components, proteins, cells, possessing electrical properties, like how we talking about their semiconductors, is not a fringe idea, but a growing area of scientific and technological inquiry. How we talking about humans are carbon-based semiconductors. Graphene is a carbon-based semiconductor and everything like that. So we getting into this is kind of the basis. What he's talking about, the technological inquiry, this is the basis for the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of injectable things, the Internet of injectable nano things, all those things like that. With significant potential for medical advancements, like what I just said. Advances in semiconductor technology, in fact, are providing the tools to more deeply explore biological systems at the nanocell scale, carbon nanotubules, things of that nature. Okay, proteins in cells as semiconductors. The concept of biological components as semiconductors extend beyond simple interfacing to fundamental properties of the components themselves. What? Research has demonstrated that proteins can be engineered to function as semiconductors. Proteins can be engineered to function as semiconductors. So that goes back into um, Albertson, Georgie, where he was talking about how proteins are semiconductors. And it goes into what Becker is talking about. A 2014 patent describes how the conductivity type of a protein can be controlled by modifying the charge of its amino acid residues, allowing for the creation of p-type and n-type protein semiconductors, and even functional p-n junctions with energy bands. This is a critical, remember, energy bands are the range in which the semiconductor can conduct. This is a critical finding that directly validates the user's premise that proteins are semiconductors, right? Okay, while this has been demonstrated through engineering, it is plausible that the capability is a fundamental evolved property of biological systems. What functioning like semiconductors is a fundamental evolved property of biological systems, right? Okay, so biological systems function like semiconductors, basically. This is supported by the fact that biological processes such as cellular respiration and photosynthesis rely on quantum phenomena like electron tunneling, which allow particles to pass through energy barriers. So how we talked about how the proteins exchange electrons and stuff like that or whatever. In Tesla's model, there are no electrons and everything like that. So that's how. So that's why they take on the appearance more as capacitors or batteries and things like that in that model. Specific proteins such as ferritin have been observed to conduct electrons over long distances through sequential tunneling, demonstrating a quantum biological agent in action. The very existence of these quantum scale electrical properties in biological entities elevates the idea of a bioelectrical energetic blueprint from pure speculation to a plausible scientific hypothesis. So we've talked about the energetic blueprint before. The energetic blueprint in a more I don't know, esoteric way of talking about it. That's called sacred geometry. It's the same concept. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, the cellular capacitor, right? Capacitor is a battery, a temporary battery. Dielectric properties. Remember, I said dielectric is the electrostatic state, but it's talking about a state in which something holds a charge. Okay, dielectric properties and energetic storage. The cell membrane, a foundational component of biological life, exhibits properties analogous to an electrical capacitor, a temporary battery. A capacitor is a device that stores electrical energy by accumulating charges on two closely separated surfaces separated by a non-conductive region known as a dielectric. The cell membrane, which separates the intracellular cellular cytoplasm from the extracellular environment, functions precisely as a dielectric, maintaining an electrical potential across its surface. This potential stores energy and is a critical component of the body's bioelectrical system. So basically, he says that the cell itself functions like a capacitor. The cell membrane basically conducts electricity, and the inside of the cell is basically an insulator. Similar to how when we talk about Wardenclyffe and Tesla and everything like that, he talked about how the surface of the planet or whatever, the air and everything like that on the surface of the planet conducts electricity, and deep down in the planet is more of a dielectric or an insulator type thing. That's what he's going to pump the energy through the planet on Wardenclyffe. Okay, so the function of a, and I'm super oversimplifying that. Y'all check out Eric Dollar's stuff. He explains that in detail. I'm just kind of trying to get through some of this so we can get to the punchline. Okay, the function of a cell membrane as a dielectric goes beyond simple energy storage, right? The function of a cell membrane as a battery, excuse me, the function of a cell membrane as a dielectric goes beyond simple energy storage. The concept of a ultra capacitor, which uses a porous membrane to separate electrodes and allows ions to pass through using while blocking larger electrons, provides a direct physical analogy for a cell membrane's selective permeability. So he's saying it falls into the category of something called an ultracapacitor, which is another form of battery. Okay, that has a level of selective permeability, how it's described here. This demonstrates that the same physical principles apply across different scales, from man-made devices to biological systems. The cell's capacitive state and membrane potential, therefore, are not merely incidental, but are central to the cell's ability to maintain a state of electrical potential and information. So remember how we were talking about in Jerry Tennant, his work or whatever case may be. We know the cell has a certain level of voltage and everything like that. What Jerry Tennant was likening high and low voltage to alkalinity and acidity in the body, like similar to how Dr. Sebi and all the followers of his school of thought or whatever deal with that. Okay, keeping it going. Okay, so okay, so now we're gonna get to, I know just then we went a little bit deeper into, cellular biology a little bit. You see what I'm saying? Correlating it with the electrical thing, because we're gonna build up, because we're gonna still get into the conversation about the human soul and stem cells. We're just building it up from the previous conversation so we can solidify the fact that the body is electrical and everything like that. Okay, so the core synthesis, matter as a dielectric vortex with an energetic blueprint. So in Tesla's framework, um, you get into a lot of the things that may be, let's say, like a cell. In some of this language, it's referred to as, let's say, like a dielectric vortex or what have you, where, let's say, like the speed of the vortex or whatever accounts for the weight of whatever it is, whatever the if it be a I don't know, a hypothetical subatomic particle, if it be a molecule or something like that, the weight of it is associated with the speed of the vortex or whatever case may be. The dielectric nature of it is because it's in a static state, it's an electrostatic state, and it's holding a framework, it's holding a charge, or whatever case may be. Let's see here. The first major synthesis of this report is the correlation between Becker's bioelectric model and Tesla's etheric framework. Okay, so Becker's DC electrical control system, which he believes was based on electronic, not ionic currents, and could originate in a solid rather than in water, is a conceptual parallel to Tesla's ether, right? Because he's talking about the cells communicate between cells and everything like that. Just as Tesla envisioned ether as the universal medium for energy and force, Becker's system can be viewed as a biological medium for control and information. The very idea of a unified field theory that connects fundamental physics with Becker's experiments has been discussed in other theoretical works supporting this conceptual linkage. The correlation posits that Becker's bioelectric currents are a localized living expression of more fundamental etheric medium. So we're going to get into this. When we talk about matter vortex correlation. Okay, so this is Tesla stuff. I know this is wordy and nerdy, but we're trying to get through to it because we are gonna get to the punchline about the soul and reincarnation and all that stuff like that. So, building on Tesla's etheric vision and William Thompson Lord Kelvin's 19th century vortex theory of the atom, this report, let's see, proposed a model where matter is not composed of solid particles but of stable energetic vortex patterns in a universal medium. This is a modern reinterpretation of the theory that suggests elementary particles are vortices in a fluid-like medium called ether. Elementary particles, all right? So we trying to get past this. Elementary particles. Tesla doesn't believe in these small subatomic particles. This comes in place of the particles. Vortices in a fluid-like medium, like you flushing the toilet. Vortices in a fluid-like medium called the ether or vacuum. In this model, the properties of a substance are not inherent, but are direct manifestations of a stable, knotted vortex structure that defines it, right? The mass of a particle, for example, could be a manifestation of the rotational speed of its vortex, like how we were saying a little bit earlier. This perspective provides a powerful physical basis for the concept of an energetic blueprint, right? The unique geometry and dynamics of a molecule or atom are its blueprint. The unique geometry and dynamics of a molecule or atom are its blueprint. How we talking about this ties into sacred geometry, the whole idea of a blueprint. And the entire physical world is the result of countless quantum interactions stabilizing into these recognizable patterns, similar to how we were talking about Jacobo Grimberg and some of the stuff that he was talking about. You see what I'm saying? So, fields interpenetrating fields. You see what I'm saying? Vortexes intersecting vortexes, a whole symphony of things going on, symphony of resonance, so to speak, going on. Okay, so the cell as a dielectric resonator of a blueprint. So let's get into this. So we're getting closer to this thing about the human soul. Okay, the cell as a dielectric resonator of a blueprint. The living cell with its capacitive membrane, the capacitive membrane, it's a battery basically, a temporary battery, and semiconducting proteins is uniquely equipped to interact with and it manifests such a universal energetic blueprint. The cell's dielectric state, its electrostatic state, it's in a position under stress. Its blueprint as a specialized kidney cell, liver cell, brain cell, whatever it is, which stores energy, can be seen as a localized strain of the ether, analogous to the energy storage Tesla described. The cell is not merely a bag of chemicals, but functions as a dielectric resonator, right? Resonance is vibrate instead of exchanging electrons, it's resonate, it's sending a signal and it's and the other whatever it's sending it to is resonating at the same frequency that it was resonating at. Okay, a localized field that receives and stabilizes the universal blueprint information, that localizes and receives and stabilizes the universal blueprint information, thereby giving rise to physical form and function. So basically, like I was saying before, anything that has a physical form and physical attributes has to have some form of blueprint behind it, is basically what they're saying. In this blueprint, or whatever case may be, if you ever get a chance, look up it's a Buddhist sage Nag Arjuna. He has a whole thing where he talks about um, dependent arisings in nature, how nature is interdependent in everything physical, or everything is dependent on some other form of energy that feeds it, or whatever case may be. Thus, nothing is inherently real. But he goes in, but it's a similar thing to this. Okay, um, in order for a thing to have let's see, a form and attributes, it has to be absorbing a certain quality of energy from somewhere else to be able to facilitate that form in the blueprint of it all, if that makes any sense. Okay, so this is supported by the idea that quantum information is a hidden blueprint that creates reality itself from particles to cells. So from subatomic particles to cells, it's all subject to this blueprint. It absorbs energy like a battery, but it's not a battery like a Duracell. It's a battery as in the state that it's in. It absorbs its blueprint and its form and function from somewhere else, or whatever case may be. And when it's done with that or whatever, it can differentiate into something else, is what we're about to get into. Okay, so let's see here. An electrical perspective on reincarnation. Okay, so this is kind of like more of the punchline what we're talking about. An electrical perspective on reincarnation. The soul as a stem cell. So we're gonna make this correlation real quick. Uh, okay, the central metaphorical correlation of this model. Okay, this is the punchline. Defines the soul not as a spiritual essence, but as the fundamental unspecialized energetic pattern of the organism, right? So the blueprint that we've been talking about this whole time or whatever, This thought experiment, we're gonna liken the soul to that blueprint, or the concept is an electrical analog to the biological function of a uh, pluripotent stem cell, a high potential, undifferentiated state with the capacity to become any specialized cell type. Okay, let's go back on over this. The central metaphorical correlation of this model defines the soul not as a spiritual essence. So we're not dealing with it from a spiritual perspective. We're trying to see it from a different perspective. Not saying it's not spiritual, but we just filtering that out right now because we're trying to figure some different nuances out in this. So, but as the fundamental, unspecialized, energetic pattern of the organism. So every organism, we're dealing with the soul as if it's the undifferentiated, energetic blueprint of that particular organism. You pre-physical, all that. Okay, so this concept is an electrical analog to the biological function of a pluripotent stem cell. Okay, nature's self-similar across scales. We going with that. So making this correlation. A high potential, undifferentiated state with the capacity to become any specialized cell. So we gonna deal with the soul as a highly uh, potent, undifferentiated state with the capacity for some sort of transformation. So this soul blueprint exists as a subtle energy pattern or an informational field that guides the organism's physical manifestation throughout its life. It is the core identity, the raw potential from which all physical being is formed. So that's kind of what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the soul, kind of to define that. But we're not dealing with it from a spiritual perspective. We're dealing with it from an electrical perspective, similar to how we talked about cells. We did all that work explaining how cells are electrical and all this stuff like that. Rewind, you might have to rewind this video a couple of times or whatever. We did all that work to establish how cells are electrical. Now we're kind of putting in how they have a blueprint that defines what type of cell it's going to be. Now we're talking about the soul from that same perspective. Specialized cells as manifested lives, right? So we're making this correlation. In this model, the lives of a person are correlated to the differentiated, specialized cells that make up their physical body and carry out specific fixed function. So just like the stem cell becomes a liver cell, okay, you become John Smith. You know what I'm saying? Okay, each life is a unique and complex expression of the core blueprint, analogous to a muscle cell, nerve cell, or a bone cell that has lost its pluripotency and committed to a specific final form. Your final form is Sarah Jackson. I'm just making up random names. What's up, Sarah Jackson, if you out there? But you became, you know, Michael Jones, Sarah Jackson, whatever your final form was. Okay, each life is a transient, materialized expression with a finite lifespan, a temporary ego. The entire body is a collective of these specialized lives, working in concert to express the grander blueprint, right? So go back to the video where we talked about when we went into self to self and the experiential, and we talked about the principle and the ego and the agent. The principle, the ego, and the agent. The principle can fire the agent. You see what I'm saying? Because you effing up so bad that you messing up the blueprint because the agent the actions of the agent affects the reputation of the principle. He's responsible for the stuff that you do. So yeah, you can get fired. You can be doing so bad as far as the self is concerned. It can take you up out of here. So we can try this again. Okay, so let's explore that. The de-differentiation of reincarnation. All right. The death of a person is a physical process of dissolution. But from this perspective, it is a grand electrical de-differentiation event. Remember, we spent a little time talking about de-differentiation earlier in this? Okay, as the physical specialized life, like a specialized cell, John Smith, like the liver cell, breaks down the bioelectrical currents that maintain his differentiated state dissipate. Your body from ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You ain't Sarah Jackson no more. Okay, this dissipation acts as the electrical trigger for the organism's energetic blueprint, in this case, in this analogy, the soul, to revert to its fundamental, high potential, unspecialized state. What? Ready for a new differentiation or reincarnation. So that's the core, that's a part of the correlation. This process directly mirrors Becker's findings on how negative electrical currents trigger cellular de-differentiation and rebirth. The negative electrical current could be likened unto the death. In this model, death is not an end, but a reversion, a homecoming to a primordial state or pure potential. So in this thought experiment, it kind of like supports the idea that you can't really die, that you just go from one phase to another one. I know it, it ain't too many people that died and came back, you feel me, to talk about it. So, we just a lot of this is pure speculation. That's why I say this ain't the God. I'm not passing this off as the gospel truth. This is just a thought experiment. However, we do acknowledge that nature is self-similar across scale. So this, based on everything people say about reincarnation and based on the actions in this whole science of the stem cell or whatever, this may potentially be a worthwhile correlation. So we're gonna move right along. An electrical feedback loop, right? So it calls karma, what's commonly called as karma, an electrical feedback loop, the karma of a blueprint, right? So why would the principal fire the agent? You know what I'm saying? The principal can fire the agent. Why is that? Revisiting the concept of karma from spiritual traditions, we can speculate on a physical electrical feedback mechanism, right? That provides a physical basis for the philosophical concept. The expertises, experiences, actions, and lessons, quote unquote, of life, quote unquote, the specialized cell, Sarah Jackson, could leave an electrical or informational imprint on the core of the energetic blueprint. You see what I'm saying? Remember how we talking about in the video, the principle of the ego and the agent, and how you can get fired and all that, and how to you're the agent, but you represent the principle. It's a similar thing how it's talking about it, but it's saying that your actions could imprint the original blueprint. Your actions can affect the original blueprint. So basically, what it's saying, if you come in this lifetime as Jack the Ripper, you know what I'm saying? All the dirt you do is Jack the Ripper. When you leave out, when you finish being Jack the Ripper, the next time you come back or whatever, Jack the Ripper's karma, so to speak, or actions have affected the original blueprint. So now you got to deal with the changes to the original blueprint as Steve Smith. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so just as the soul blueprint, let's say, quote unquote, is described as vulnerable to blocks, restrictions, bruises, and ailments from choices that are out of alignment with the core design, the bioelectric state of the specialized body, John Smith, whatever, could modulate the parameters of the undifferentiated blueprint. You can screw up and mess up the blueprint. Your actions and deeds and things of being a specialized individual, John Smith, can mess up the soul blueprint or affect the soul blueprint. You see what I'm saying? The what this is saying, or the original pattern, the original blueprint, as it reverts to its high potential state. This imprint would then influence the parameters and challenges of the next differentiation, right? Providing a non spiritual, purely physicalist basis for karmatic cycles and universal justice of the system. So basically, they're saying that the idea of karma from this perspective in this thought experiment, karma would be an electrical feedback loop. You see what I'm saying? Okay, right? So let's see, discussion, limitation. Let's see here, conceptual model. Okay, so the implications of the unified model. This unified model, if even partially validated, has profound implications. Yes, it does. It would suggest that life is a fundamental electrical phenomenon rather than a solely chemical one, right? But they want to keep selling you medicine, so it got to be a chemical reality. Okay, a position argued by Becker. It would also lend credence to the idea that consciousness itself may be an emergent property of a brain produced electromagnetic field. I think we've talked about that on several videos about how the heart produces a field. Jacobo Greenberg was talking about how the brain produces a field and everything like that. So we pretty much leaning toward the direction that the brain just reads the field or what have you, or has access to the information in the field to a limited extent. As suggested by some electromagnetic theories of consciousness, the model would also provide a framework for future inquiries, such as developing new ways to measure the body's direct current fields and exploring the quantum level of information exchange between the theoretical energetic blueprint and the living cell. So the quantum level information exchange between the theoretical energetic blueprint, the soul, what we talking about, theoretical energetic blueprint, something like likened unto the soul, and the living cell, or whatever case may be. That's similar to what the bridge between that, what we were talking about on previous videos, like would be the human biofield or the aura or whatever case may be. We talked about how that potentially has the ability to store memories and things of that nature. So that's the outgrowth of this gross physical body. We're talking about the cell and everything like that. Okay. So, uh, in conclusion, by correlating the bioelectric research of Robert Becker with the etheric framework of Nikola Tesla and augmenting it with the insights of modern bioelectrics, the report has successfully constructed a cohesive, non-spiritual model of reincarnation. Yes, we did. The report provides a physicalist framework and a new language for discussing concepts historically confined to the spiritual realm. So that would kind of be, because we have to remember, though Tesla's physics and framework is on the electrical side of the game, his whole framework is influenced by Vedic metaphysics from Swami Vivekananda. So he's kind of like the bridge between a lot of this stuff, some of the stuff that he laid down. Okay, the report provides a physicalist framework and a new language for discussing concepts historically found in the spiritual realm by defining the soul as a high potential energetic blueprint and lives as transient manifestations. This model opens up the door for these ancient ideas to be explored and understood in the lens of physics and biology, thereby potentially paving the way for future scientific investigation. So just wanted to, kind of touch on that. That is just was just a thought experiment, kind of stretching out the whole thing about the ether into I don't know, matter, period. um, Human biology, cells, proteins, and all that. How when we get into Becker stuff, it talks about how a lot of the parts of the body, as far as cells and proteins and everything like that, how they act like semiconductors. When we kind of get to Tesla stuff or whatever case may be, or something closer in that direction, we get into these etheric vortexes as opposed to particles and stuff like that. And even the cell is viewed to an extent like an etheric vortex or whatever case may be, but also a battery of sorts that stores some sort of program, a blueprint of sorts or whatever case may be, that determines the form and function of whatever or whatever case may be, whatever it is. So that's quite interesting. Correlating that with the traditional understanding of the transmigration of souls, reincarnation, and all that stuff like that. Potentially the soul being some sort of neutral state. How we talked about positive, negative, and neutral. Go back to the previous videos. We talked about the three states that they talk about. A lot of people from this etheric model talk about, John Keely, Nikola Tesla, the positive, negative, neutral. Keely calls it the triple chord, but a similar thing, or whatever case may be. The soul being, let's say, like the primitive state, or whatever case may be, that the individual goes back into once this physical composition decomposes, ready to be specialized into a new guy, a new individual, a new life, or whatever. So that's an interesting correlation. Again, we're not saying that that's the gospel truth or anything like that. We just kind of like doing a little thought experiment and kind of bringing a couple of different pieces together. That I thought that would be an interesting piece. Yeah, appreciate y'all for bearing with me for for this 48-minute video and everything like that, man. You like what you've been hearing. I know it might have been a little wordy and a little nerdy, man. I was trying to kind of like, scale it down. Yeah, I mean, so it wouldn't be so science heavy in the terms and everything like that. But appreciate y'all for checking me out, man. Appreciate y'all, man. Peace to the true and living, man. Y'all like what y'all been hearing, like and subscribe. Till next time, peace of the gods, man.